Power never reveals itself in shouting, but in the silence that makes others listen. What would you do if you witnessed someone being treated unfairly for simply trying to get home to their child? Let us know in the comments section below. This is a story that asks how far we'll go to protect the ones we love. The call crackled through the cruiser's radio, but Deputy Kyle Mercer ignored it. He had one hand draped over the wheel, the other cradling a half-finished red bowl, warm from the floorboard heat. His eyes weren't on the road. They were fixed on a dusty corner gas station ahead, the kind with sun-bleached soda signs and flickering lights that always buzzed a little too loud. "There she is," he muttered under his breath. His partner, Deputy Sean Trask, glanced up from his tablet, still trying to finish entering the last incident report. Some nonsense about a kid with a slingshot and a broken window. Sean was 25, newly minted, and constantly had that jittery look like someone halfway between a college seminar and a parole hearing. Kyle parked the cruiser without urgency, diagonal across two spaces near the pump island. The sun had dipped low enough to cast long shadows on the asphalt. Rachel Norwood stepped out of her beat-up SUV, graceful even in exhaustion, though you wouldn't know it from her wary eyes or the slight limp in her left leg. Her hospital scrubs were wrinkled, her ponytail frayed at the edges. She clutched her phone and keys in one hand, her purse slung over her shoulder. She didn't even glance at the deputies. She was focused, precise, like someone used to triaging crises, but not looking for one. Kyle watched her walk into the store, the glass door sucking closed behind her. "Why her?" Sean asked, still seated stiffly. Kyle leaned back in his seat and exhaled through his nose. "Because people like that need to be reminded," he said flatly, "that a badge still means something around here." Sean blinked. "She's just buying gas." Kyle gave him a sideways glance. "You ever stop to ask why someone's still in scrubs at 9 p.m.? You ever wonder if she's really coming off a shift or using that uniform for sympathy?" He sniffed. "I see people like her every damn day, acting like the system owes them something." Inside the store, Rachel moved quietly through the aisles. She grabbed a gallon of milk, a sandwich for Carter, her 8-year-old, and a protein bar for herself, even though she knew she'd probably forget to eat it. As she approached the counter, she could already feel it. The change. The way the cashier suddenly went stiff. The shift in the air. Subtle, but electric. The door had swung open again. Kyle Mercer stepped in, his uniform tight around his shoulders, his boots clicking a little too loud against the tile. He wasn't smiling. Rachel didn't look up. She set her items on the counter with practiced ease and opened her wallet. "You got ID?" Kyle's voice cut through the air, not directed at the cashier, but squarely at her. Rachel's brow furrowed. "Excuse me?" "Need to see your ID," Kyle repeated, tapping the laminated badge on his chest like punctuation. "Routine." "No, it's not," she said, her voice even but tired. "I'm just buying groceries. I'm not doing anything wrong." Sean stepped in behind him, clearly uncomfortable. He scanned the room like someone hoping it would all diffuse on its own. Rachel turned slightly, pulling her license from her wallet. "Here," she said, holding it between two fingers. "Rachel Norwood. You can run it if you want. But I'd like to get home to my son." Kyle took the ID but didn't even glance at it. Instead, he leaned a little too close. "Bit defensive for someone who's got nothing to hide, huh?" She stared at him. "I'm defensive because I've been on my feet for 14 hours, I just saw 2 people die on my shift, and I have a kid waiting on me. I'm not in the mood to be tested." Kyle tilted his head, mock sympathy painted across his face. "Maybe you should plan better, or pick a different neighborhood to stop in." He gestured to the store's security camera above. "Looks like it's been a long day for both of us." Rachel's patience cracked for half a second, but not in a way he expected. She didn't yell. She didn't back down either. "Are you done?" she asked softly. Kyle was about to respond when a soft ding from the door sounded again. A woman in a hoodie and leggings stepped in. She paused, brows raised, watching silently as Kyle held onto Rachel's license like it was contraband. Lena Brooks didn't speak, but her phone was already angled up slightly in her hand, screen glowing red, recording. Kyle noticed. His jaw clenched. "I'm conducting a lawful inquiry," he said loudly, turning just enough so his voice carried. "You're interfering with an investigation if you don't move along." Rachel's voice didn't rise. "There is no investigation. There's a woman in scrubs trying to get home, and a man with a badge who doesn't like that I didn't flinch." Kyle turned back to her, eyes narrowing. "Keep talking and we'll see how fast you end up in the back of my cruiser." But that's when the sound changed, subtle but enough to twist Kyle's expression. Outside the store, a diesel engine rumbled to a halt. Heavy, low. Kyle turned slightly toward the glass. From the pickup, a tall figure stepped down, broad-shouldered, clean-cut, with a calm gait and deliberate steps. He moved slowly toward the door, posture unhurried. The man didn't say anything. He didn't have to. Rachel turned her head slightly as the bell chimed again, and when Kyle saw him, really saw him, his bravado stuttered. The man's boots didn't squeak. His expression was unreadable. He didn't ask questions. He just walked up beside Rachel and laid a hand on the counter. Rachel didn't need to introduce him. The line of his jaw, the faded scars on his knuckles, the stillness in his presence, all said more than a name ever could. Kyle didn't speak. Neither did Caleb Monroe. It was Sean who stepped back first. Rachel took her ID back and turned toward her husband, who didn't ask if she was okay. He knew better. She looked up at him and nodded once. And then, with devastating quiet, Caleb turned to Kyle Mercer and smiled. It wasn't a threat, not really. It was the kind of smile that said, "I don't need to raise my voice. You've already made the biggest mistake of your night." Kyle tried to reassert control. He cleared his throat. "Sir, I'm going to need you to—" "You're going to need to leave," Caleb said quietly. Just like that. No flourish, no aggression, just gravity. Kyle blinked. "What?" Caleb stepped forward. Half an inch. That was all it took. "I said, you need to leave," he repeated. "Now." And for the first time that night, Kyle Mercer didn't have a comeback. Caleb didn't wait for a reply. He didn't need one. The silence inside the store was thick, punctuated only by the faint hum of a fluorescent light and the rhythmic clicking of the cooler motor behind the soda aisle. Kyle Mercer's jaw tightened, but his feet refused to move. Somewhere behind him, Sean shifted nervously, toeing the faded line tile with his boot, unsure whether to step forward or backward. Caleb's presence had changed the oxygen in the room. It was heavier now. It pressed on the chest. Rachel leaned slightly into her husband's side, not in weakness, but in unspoken alliance. The way soldiers move through hostile terrain, back to back, eyes scanning opposite directions. Kyle finally found his voice. "You threatening a peace officer?" Caleb looked at him, not with anger or even disdain, but with clarity, the kind of look that comes from surviving things most men wouldn't talk about. The kind of look that asks, "Are you sure you want to do this?" without ever raising volume. "No," Caleb said. "I'm reminding you who you're not dealing with." That made Kyle snort, a brittle thing. He puffed his chest. "And who am I not dealing with?" Caleb looked down at the deputy's badge, then back at his eyes. "A woman who's beneath your respect. A man who'll play the game with you. Or anyone who's forgotten what integrity looks like." Sean exhaled. A little too loudly. Rachel's voice followed next, calm but cutting. "You know what he's doing, right?" she asked Sean directly. Sean blinked. "He's hoping you'll back him up," she continued. "So when it hits the fan, and it will, he won't be the only one with a badge to explain." That caught. You could see it land behind Sean's eyes. The slow realization, the growing weight. Kyle's nostrils flared. He jabbed a finger in Caleb's direction. "You're interfering with an officer of the law." "No," Caleb interrupted. "I'm a man who walked in to find his wife cornered, her ID taken without cause, and her voice dismissed. That's not an investigation. That's harassment." Kyle scoffed. "You don't get to define that." "No," Caleb said again, more softly. "But a jury will." That cracked something, because Kyle wasn't stupid. He was arrogant, not clueless. He'd been skating for a while, relying on fear, on people backing down, on people not wanting the hassle. But this wasn't a traffic stop on the side of some dark road. This was a lit store, cameras humming overhead, a bystander still filming, and a man standing in front of him who wasn't intimidated in the slightest. Lena cleared her throat from the corner. "Just a heads up. I'm lying." Kyle turned toward her like a cornered dog. "Turn that off." Lena didn't flinch. "Nope." Sean's voice came next, surprisingly clear. "Kyle, we should go." Sean swallowed. "We're done here." Kyle stared at him, eyes wide, betrayed. Sean didn't blink. "I'll call it in," he said, quieter this time. "Write it as unfounded. We'll log the contact, move on." Kyle hesitated, then threw Rachel's license on the counter with just enough force to make it slap. "You're lucky," he muttered. Rachel didn't respond. Kyle turned to Caleb one last time, trying to salvage his pride. "You think you're special because you walk in here with your chest out and your square jaw? You think I care what branch you served in?" Caleb didn't move. "You don't need to care," he said. "You just need to step out." It was Sean who held the door open. Kyle stormed past him, the cruiser door slamming seconds later. Sean lingered. He met Rachel's eyes with something close to shame. Then he nodded, barely perceptible, and followed his partner out. The door shut. The bell stopped ringing. The silence that followed was strange. Thicker than before. Lena lowered her phone. Rachel leaned against the counter, suddenly feeling all the weight she'd been carrying for the last 14 hours, and the last few minutes. "Carter still up?" Caleb asked quietly. She shook her head. "Probably not. I texted Maya to keep him for an extra hour. I didn't want him to see me like this." Caleb nodded, his jaw twitching faintly. "You didn't do anything wrong," he said. "I know," she whispered. They didn't speak for a few seconds. Behind the counter, the cashier, some 20-something kid with a manager badge that looked fresh out the plastic, was frozen in place. "Sorry," he finally blurted, his voice cracking. "I didn't know what to do. They came in and I've never seen anyone talk back to them before." Caleb didn't turn toward him. He just spoke into the air. "Next time, do something." The kid nodded, swallowing hard. Rachel picked up her items and placed them in her bag. She hadn't even realized she was still holding her debit card. Lena stepped forward, slipping her phone into her hoodie. Feeling the lent me translation. "I'm posting it," she said. "It's already streaming, but I'll save the video too. It's going to blow up." Rachel didn't answer at first. Then, "That's not why I said anything." "I know," Lena replied, "but maybe it's why I did." Caleb finally looked at her. "You okay?" Lena smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Ask me after it goes viral, then maybe I'll have an answer." Outside, the sound of the cruiser pulling away filled the quiet. Rachel exhaled. It was over. For now. But she knew what came next. The calls. The questions. Maybe even pushback. She slung the bag over her shoulder and reached for Caleb's hand. His palm was rough but steady, solid. They walked out together without saying goodbye. The wind bit, a little colder now. The gas station lights buzzed overhead, suddenly much brighter. Caleb opened the truck door for her. She didn't need help up, but tonight she didn't mind accepting it. Once inside, he started the engine, letting the heater warm the cab. Neither spoke as he pulled onto the road, merging into the soft hush of a suburban evening that now felt more brittle. 10 minutes passed before she said anything. "They thought I was alone," she said, staring at the passing streetlights. That I wouldn't speak up. Philip didn't take his eyes off the road. They underestimated the wrong woman. Rachel turned to him, tired but lit with something harder than fire. "They underestimated both of us." He glanced at her then and smiled. For the first time that day, Rachel did too. Behind them, somewhere in the tangled web of social media, Lena's video was already gaining traction. The hashtags were starting, the shares ticking upward. But for now, for just a few minutes, it was quiet. And for Rachel Norwood, that was enough. By morning, Rachel Norwood's name was everywhere, and not because she wanted it to be. It started with Lena's clip, a 6-minute video, shaky and dimly lit, but powerful in its rawness. It showed everything: the confrontation, Kyle's aggression, Caleb's calm, the tension so thick it nearly vibrated through the screen. By the time Rachel poured her first cup of coffee, it had been reposted over 40,000 times. By the second sip, local news had picked it up. By the third, national accounts with blue check marks were tagging her name in headlines she hadn't authorized. Next to words she didn't write. Her phone didn't stop buzzing. Calls, notifications, messages. Half were strangers calling her brave. The other half were people wanting interviews, quotes, statements, access. Everyone wanted a piece of something that had taken her 15 years of motherhood and grit to build, and no one wanted to ask if she was okay. Caleb stood in the kitchen, quietly making eggs the same way he had every morning since his return from deployment. 3 over-easy, toast with too much butter. It was his ritual, his anchor. She watched him from across the counter, her hand around a ceramic mug, but barely drinking. "I didn't ask for this," she said finally. "I know. They're calling me a hero." "You what?" She sighed. "You stood up to him, Caleb. You're the reason it went viral." Caleb slid eggs onto a plate, turned and set it in front of her. "That's not why it went viral." Rachel frowned. "It's because everyone saw something they've felt," he said. "Being dismissed, cornered, forced to justify their existence. You didn't scream. You didn't cry. You stood your ground. I just wanted to buy milk." Caleb smiled faintly. "That's the point." Her phone vibrated again. Called away, she ignored it. "You think he's going to retaliate?" she asked. Kyle Mercer. The name tasted bitter. The type of man who held onto resentment like it was a second gun. Alan's jaw tightened. "He won't do it in uniform, not now. But men like that, they find other ways." Rachel pushed her plate aside, untouched. "I have to go in." Caleb raised an eyebrow. "You sure? They're short 2 nurses already. I can't bail now. I'll wear a hoodie. Keep my head down." "Doesn't matter what you wear, Rach." She knew he was right. But showing up, that was her way of winning, of not letting fear take the wheel. "Can you drop Carter at school?" Caleb nodded. She stood, kissed the top of his head, and disappeared into the bedroom. Caleb stared at the front door long after she closed it. Later that morning, Baldwin County's Sheriff's Department released a vague 2-paragraph statement. It acknowledged a community concern, promised internal review, and assured citizens that officer conduct remains a top priority. It mentioned no names. It took no responsibility. Kyle Mercer was already on paid administrative leave by noon. But in his home, tucked behind a row of pine trees in a gated yard, he wasn't pacing with worry. He was seething. He watched the video over and over, jaw clenched so hard it clicked. Every playback was a reminder, not just of the way Caleb had outmaneuvered him, but of the humiliation, the weakness, the way Sean had abandoned him in front of witnesses, the way his authority had evaporated like mist. He had never felt that before, not since high school, when he was still Kyle from nowhere, the kid with the drunk dad and a rusted truck. He'd built a uniform around himself, wore it like armor. For 10 years it had worked. Until now. His phone buzzed. He snatched it up, hoping for some kind of redemption, a message of support, a fellow deputy saying they had his back. It was a number he didn't recognize. The message was short. Watcher 6, videos everywhere. You're screwed. Kyle stared at it, breathing hard. Then he hurled the phone across the room, watched it smash against the wall and drop to the floor in a silent surrender. At Baldwin Regional Hospital, Rachel clocked in through the back. No fanfare, no interviews, just tired fluorescent lights and the smell of antiseptic and too much coffee. But the moment she stepped into the nurse's station, eyes turned, one by one. Subtle, then not. The ER attending, Dr. Varma, gave her a quick nod and handed her a chart. Trauma Bay 1, car crash. You good? Rachel blinked. Yeah, I'm fine. Good, because it's bad. The rest of the staff stayed quiet, but not unkind. They didn't crowd her. They didn't ask for details. Instead, they did the only thing that mattered. They treated her like she was still Rachel, still a nurse, still their own. And that more than anything meant the world. By noon, she'd stopped checking her phone. The headlines kept multiplying. Friends she hadn't spoken to in years were sending DMs. Advocacy groups wanted her to speak. Politicians wanted a statement. But Rachel only wanted to finish her shift. Meanwhile, Caleb wasn't idle. He'd spent the morning calling some old names. Retired men with scars and government pensions, names like Big Jim Whitaker and Dennis Stroud and Frankie Hawk Hernandez. Guys who didn't live online, but understood exactly how these stories played out when attention faded and shadows crept back in. They didn't offer sympathy, just questions. What do you need, Caleb? And Caleb, quiet as ever, replied, Insured. That afternoon, he met with Lena Brooks in a quiet booth at the back of a diner near Route 60. She'd taken the day off from her job at the elementary school, citing personal reasons. She wore no makeup, her eyes were rimmed red, and she had a backup battery plugged into her phone like a lifeline. I'm getting death threats, she said flatly, pouring too much sugar into her iced tea. People think I staged it, think I'm trying to get famous. You expected that? Caleb asked. I expected noise. I didn't expect people to dig through 10 years of my Facebook posts and call my job. You okay? She snorted. I'm still here, aren't I? He nodded. Lena leaned forward. Tell me something, Caleb. What? Well, did you mean to scare him that bad? Caleb didn't answer right away. I didn't scare him, he said. He saw himself. That's what scared him. Lena blinked. I don't follow. He saw the line, Caleb said. The one you're not supposed to cross. And realized he already had. Lena leaned back, exhaling. Well, I hope he remembers it. Caleb looked at her. He won't. She understood then. The real story wasn't just a viral video or a public outcry. The real story was what came after. When the world moved on, but the people involved still had to live with what had been exposed. As evening approached, Rachel stepped out of the hospital into cool air and soft orange light. Her shoulders were sore, her head buzzed. But there, parked just beyond the ambulance bay, was Caleb's truck. She smiled, just a little. He was leaning against the hood, arms crossed, no words, just presence. She walked up, let herself fall into him. He wrapped an arm around her and whispered against her temple, You're not alone in this. And she believed him. Not because of the video, not because of the headlines, but because when the world closed in, Caleb hadn't raised his voice. He had stood beside her. That, Rachel knew, was the kind of strength they couldn't edit out. It didn't take long before the sheriff himself came knocking, figuratively first, then literally. 3 days after the video blew up, Sheriff Martin Hale stood behind a podium in front of a haphazard press setup. The seal of Baldwin County gleamed behind him, too polished for the chipped courthouse steps that bore it. He looked tired. Not weary in the way Rachel looked after back-to-back shifts, or the way Caleb looked in those silent mornings when the nightmares hadn't quite faded, but tired of optics, tired of the wrong kind of attention. The incident involving Deputy Kyle Mercer is currently under formal investigation, Hale said, his voice deliberately calm. We have placed the deputy on leave pending the outcome, and will be working with the community to rebuild trust. Rachel watched it all from the break room TV at the hospital, a bag of pretzels crumpled in one hand. No apology, no mention of her by name. Just the incident. As if what happened was a traffic jam. Caleb had warned her. They'll acknowledge the fire, he said, but they'll pretend no one lit the match. Later that evening, the doorbell rang at the Norwoods' home. Not a knock, just the long, sharp chime of a doorbell no one really used. Caleb opened the door to find Sheriff Hale himself standing there, tie loosened, one hand gripping a plain brown folder. "Evening," Hale said, offering a nod. "Mind if I come in?" Caleb held his ground. "Rachel's not here." "Not here for her," Hale said. "Here for you." Caleb raised an eyebrow. Hale shifted. 2 minutes. That's all I need." After a long pause, Caleb stepped aside. Inside, Hale didn't sit. He didn't ask for water. He opened the folder and held out a printed screenshot, grainy, low resolution, but unmistakable. It was a social media post from a fringe veterans group. A still frame from the gas station video. Caleb's face frozen in that quiet moment of confrontation. "You know who shared this first?" Hale asked. "Some retired colonel from Kentucky. Has 500,000 followers and a podcast. 3 million views in 2 days. My office has been buried in calls ever since." Caleb crossed his arms. "Good." Hale exhaled. "No, not good." "Caleb, I've got council members asking if we should fire half the department. Protesters outside the courthouse. Mercer's lawyer is screaming wrongful termination. Says your wife escalated the situation by recording and refusing lawful orders." "And Kyle?" Caleb's eyes narrowed. "He's not going quietly," Hale said. "Word is, he's threatening to sue the department and you." Caleb didn't flinch. "Let him." "You don't get it," Hale said. "He's building a case. Says you used military intimidation tactics, that you made him fear for his safety. Claims you stepped forward in an aggressive posture." Caleb gave a small, humorless laugh. Didn't realize standing still counted as an assault. Hale lowered the folder. "I'm not saying I believe him," he said, "but I need you to understand. This thing is bigger now. I've got voters, unions, and lawyers circling like buzzards. If this goes to court, they'll dig into everything. Your record, Rachel's shifts, whether Carter missed school. They'll turn your whole family into a deposition." Caleb stayed silent. Hale softened his tone. "Look, man, I know who you are. I remember the citation from that rescue op in Kandahar. You were a hero. Still are. But heroes don't always win when the system decides they're inconvenient." Caleb stepped forward, slow and measured. "You want me to back off?" Hale raised both hands. "I want this to settle. Quietly. Cleanly. Maybe a mediated statement, a handshake. The press moves on. Mercer takes a reprimand. Rachel gets recognized. Hell, maybe even a commendation. But if this thing keeps spiraling..." He trailed off. Caleb didn't blink. "Rachel isn't a headline," he said. "She's a mother, a nurse, a woman who was harassed after a 14-hour shift in front of her own community." Hale nodded, face unreadable. "Then let's protect her," he said, voice low. "But I need your help to do it. Publicly or quietly. Either way. Decide soon. Before Mercer does." The sheriff turned and let himself out. Caleb watched him walk to his cruiser and disappear into the dusk. That night the phone rang again, this time from Big Jim. Caleb answered before the second ring. "We've got a problem," Jim said. "A name from Mercer's Academy days popped up on my radar. Guy named Clay Hester." "I know the name," Caleb replied. "Mercer's old training buddy." "Trouble?" "More like proof," Jim said. "Hester's got a private group chat. Leaked screenshots show Mercer bragging about teaching citizens lessons off-duty, talking about neutralizing soft threats. And your name's in it now, right beside Rachel's." Caleb's jaw tensed. "You sure it's real?" "My guy traced it to a burner email linked to Hester's old department login," Jim said. "We've got timestamps, IP logs, enough to get real uncomfortable. Then we go public," Caleb said. "Bury him with truth." Jim paused. "You ready for what comes with that?" Caleb glanced toward the hallway where Rachel was helping Carter brush his teeth. "Whatever comes," he said. "We've already been through worse." The following day, a follow-up video dropped. This time, it wasn't from Lena or Rachel. It was from Caleb. Just under 2 minutes. Calm. Direct. He didn't speak about Kyle Mercer by name. He didn't threaten. He didn't posture. He spoke about respect, about Rachel's service to her community, about what strength really looks like, and how it's often misunderstood. He ended with a simple sentence. "Silence doesn't make you safe. Speaking up doesn't make you dangerous." The post went viral within hours. Veteran groups across the country reposted it with messages of support. Nurses shared stories of their own experiences. Fathers, mothers, even other officers, real ones, decent ones, shared their respect. But not everyone was applauding. By nightfall, Rachel received an email titled, "Soldier kept your mouth shut." It was filled with threats and slurs. She stared at the screen for a long time before forwarding it to Caleb, saying nothing. He responded by adding 3 more locks to the front door and installing a camera on the porch. That weekend, Carter asked why the news people kept saying Mommy was famous. Rachel knelt beside him, brushing hair from his face. "Because Mommy stood up when someone was being unfair. Were they unfair to you?" She smiled gently. "Yes, baby. But I had help." Carter beamed. "Daddy," she said. "And Lena too?" Rachel nodded. "And a lot of people who believe in doing what's right." Carter leaned in close. "Then you're not famous." "You're just brave." She kissed his forehead and held him just a little longer than usual. Outside, the porch light clicked on as dusk settled over their quiet street. And in homes across the county and far beyond, people watched, listened, and wondered. If it were them, would they have spoken up? The threats didn't stop. They just changed tone. Some came wrapped in fake politeness, emails suggesting peaceful conversations or private resolutions. Others were blunt, venomous, anonymous messages dropped in comment sections and voicemail inboxes. The type of language that wasn't just hateful, it was designed to shake, to isolate, to wear down resolve until silence seemed like the only safe answer. But Rachel Norwood didn't do silence. Not when her son asked why people were angry at her. Not when Caleb came home with his knuckles scraped from another veteran council meeting gone tense. Not when nurses on her shift whispered about not wanting to get involved, while side-eyeing her every time the station TV cycled through the latest coverage. And especially not when she opened her front door one morning to find a dead possum nailed to her fence post. Caleb removed it without a word, wrapped it in plastic, buried it in the corner of their yard like an unwanted secret. Rachel stood on the porch, arms crossed, unmoving. "What does it mean?" Carter asked, peeking through the window. "It means someone's scared," Caleb answered, washing his hands at the outside hose. Carter tilted his head. "Of what we remind them," Rachel said. Caleb dried his hands with an old towel. That the truth doesn't go away just because it makes you uncomfortable. 2 hours later, a squad car parked half a block away. It didn't move. It didn't flash lights, just idled. Rachel saw it from the kitchen. "You think it's Mercer?" she asked. Caleb joined her at the window. "He's not in uniform anymore. Doesn't need to be." They waited for 10 minutes before it pulled away. Sheriff Hale didn't respond to her calls that day. By then, Lena Brooks had gone quiet online too. After receiving a hand-delivered letter filled with threats and printed screen caps of her home address, she deactivated her accounts and moved in with her cousin across town. Her students asked where she'd gone. The school told them she was taking personal time. The gas station where it all started had installed new cameras, more lights, and a fresh no loitering sign. The cashier who'd frozen during the confrontation had put in notice, said he couldn't sleep anymore, said he kept thinking about how he'd said nothing. Meanwhile, Kyle Mercer was still spinning his own story. He'd hired a media consultant, an oily man in tinted glasses who fed local press carefully worded denials and phrases like misunderstood protocol and the burden of public scrutiny. Mercer gave a single interview. He wore a crisp polo, no badge. Said he regretted how things appeared. Said Caleb had used military intimidation tactics and postured for the camera. Said Rachel had refused lawful requests and played victim. Rachel didn't even finish watching the clip, but Caleb did. All of it. He watched Kyle's mannerisms, his hand placement, his choice of phrases. He made notes. He played back the moment where Kyle leaned in and said, "This could have been a conversation instead of a confrontation." Caleb played that sentence 10 times. Then he picked up the phone and called Big Jim. "It's escalating," Caleb said. "You ready to go public again?" Jim asked. "Not yet. I want him to make one more move." "You sure?" Caleb's voice was steady. "He's not done. Not until someone stops him." That same evening, Rachel was scheduled to appear at a local forum hosted by Baldwin's Community Alliance, a coalition of teachers, small business owners, veterans, and local parents. She hadn't planned to speak. But when the floor opened for comments and the fourth person in a row stood up and said, "We need more accountability," she rose from her seat. She didn't prepare a speech. She didn't need one. "I'm Rachel Norwood," she began. "I'm a nurse. I'm a mother. And like a lot of you, I didn't ask to be in this position." The room hushed. I didn't set out to be a symbol or a headline. I didn't want the cameras or the interviews. I wanted to buy milk, drive home, and kiss my son goodnight. But the moment I was treated like a suspect instead of a citizen, by someone paid to serve and protect, that choice was taken from me. She looked around the room. "And maybe you think this is political. Maybe you think it's about power or race or respect. But what it's really about is something much simpler." She paused. "It's about being seen. About being treated like you matter." A few heads nodded. Someone near the back clapped once, then stopped. Rachel stepped forward. "If we let intimidation win, if we let people like Kyle Mercer define what law and order looks like, then we've already lost. Not just me, all of us." She stopped speaking, and the room rose. Not all at once, but in waves. Applause spread like a ripple. And for the first time since the night at the gas station, Rachel felt something deeper than fear. She felt anchored. Outside the building, after the forum ended, Caleb was waiting by the truck. He didn't speak. He just opened the door for her, same as always. As she climbed in, a man in a ball cap and flannel stepped out from the shadows. Caleb clocked him instantly. Stance too rigid, hands in pockets, shoulders high. "Evening," the man said, lifting his hands slowly. Don't mean harm." "Then step into the light," Caleb said calmly. The man obeyed. "I served with Mercer," he said. "Couple years back, before he left county corrections." Caleb's expression didn't change. The man looked at Rachel. "He's not gonna stop." Rachel swallowed. "You know this?" "I've seen the pattern," he said. "You push him, he pushes harder. He finds loopholes with fists." Rachel's chest tightened. "Why tell us?" The man's eyes flicked toward Caleb. "Because someone stood up to him," he said. "And people like me, we need to see that. We need to know it's possible." He handed Caleb a flash drive, a copy of his internal complaint record, stuff that didn't make it into the official reports. Caleb took it without a word. The man nodded once and disappeared into the dark. Back in the truck, Caleb inserted the drive into his laptop, scrolling, reading. 17 unfiled incidents, 4 settlements, 2 sealed complaints from female deputies, 1 suspension that never made it to the public record. Rachel leaned in. "This is the end of the line for him, isn't it?" Caleb stared at the screen. "No," he said. "This is the beginning of accountability." And that night, they didn't talk about lawyers or threats. They didn't talk about strategy. They just lay in bed, side by side, with Carter fast asleep down the hall, and silence stretching between them like something sacred, as tomorrow they'd bring truth into the light. But tonight they rested, together, because when you stand on principle, when you fight for dignity, not for show, not for likes, but because it's right, then, even when you're tired, you never stand alone. The courtroom was smaller than Rachel expected. No oak panels or grand balconies, just gray walls, dusty blinds, and the scent of old carpet and coffee that had burned too long on a warmer. A modest place, tucked between a municipal library and a hardware store, where justice didn't come with fanfare, if it came at all. But today it did. Caleb sat beside her, his hand resting lightly on her knee, not for reassurance, but for grounding, for presence. On the other side of the aisle, Kyle Mercer sat rigid in a dark suit that didn't quite fit. His tie was crooked, his jaw set too tight, and behind his eyes that same glint, resentment, not remorse. The judge entered, a woman with silver hair pulled back into a no-nonsense bun. Her robe was plain, her eyes sharper than steel. She called the proceedings to order. It wasn't a criminal trial. At least not yet. It was a public hearing, one initiated by the Baldwin County Civil Oversight Committee following community pressure and legal requests, a place where statements would be made, evidence introduced, and recommendations formalized, whether for internal discipline, policy change, or formal prosecution. Rachel hadn't planned to speak, but when the panel chair opened the floor for witness testimony, her name was already on the list. She stood, not needing notes. "On the night in question," she began, her voice steady, "I'd just finished a double shift at Baldwin Regional. We lost a teenage boy in trauma that night, gunshot. We did everything we could. And when I left the hospital, my hands were still trembling from that loss." Kyle shifted in his seat. "I stopped for milk and a protein bar," she continued. "That was it. I was exhausted. Not reckless. I wasn't rude. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't ask for special treatment. I just existed in a way that challenged a man who thought he could control the space around him." She paused, and when I was backed into a corner, my husband, who's risked his life more times than I can count, didn't raise his fist or his voice. He showed up, that's all. And for that, we've been harassed, doxxed, and threatened. Thought, she looked directly at Kyle, and yet we're still here. The room was silent. Caleb didn't smile. He didn't nod. He just watched. The legal rep for the sheriff's department read off the complaints from Mercer's record, some sealed, some buried under bureaucracy, all now unmasked thanks to the anonymous flash drive. Repeated patterns of excessive force, off-duty intimidation, misuse of authority, unfiled reports, a dozen quiet settlements. The chair leaned back in her seat. "We have reviewed extensive evidence and heard sufficient testimony. The Oversight Committee recommends that Deputy Mercer be permanently removed from duty, banned from future law enforcement employment in the state, and referred to the District Attorney's Office for further prosecution. Kyle stood abruptly. "You can't do this. You don't know what it's like out there. You have no idea what kind of pressure we're under every day." "You're right," the judge interjected calmly. "We don't know your pressure, but we do know the law, and we know the difference between pressure and abuse." Kyle's mouth hung open, a protest on the edge of spilling, but it never came. He turned and stormed out, pushing the doors open so hard they hit the walls. Rachel's legs finally softened beneath her. She sat down slowly, her hands clasped in her lap. Caleb exhaled. They didn't say a word to each other until they were back in the truck, parked in the lot outside, just them. No reporters, no flashing cameras, just quiet. "Do you feel relief?" Caleb asked. Rachel didn't answer right away. "No," she said, "not yet." Caleb started the engine but didn't shift out of park. "I do," he said, "because you didn't back down. You didn't let the weight of the world fold you." Rachel turned to him. "I didn't do it alone. You weren't supposed to." That night, Lena came back online, not with a video, but with a letter. It read, "To everyone who watched from the sidelines, silence doesn't protect you. It just postpones your own moment of reckoning. Rachel Norwood taught us that courage doesn't shout. It stands. And because she stood, Baldwin County is different today." The post reached 500,000 shares in 24 hours. Across town, the sheriff's office issued a public apology. Not a vague statement, not a deflection. A real apology. Rachel, to Caleb, Carter. The department announced a new civilian review board, monthly de-escalation trainings, a hotline for misconduct. Change doesn't come easy, but sometimes it starts with a woman in scrubs, a man with a calm voice, and a camera held steady by someone who refused to look away. Rachel returned to work without a media circus. Some patients recognized her, some didn't. But her colleagues, now, they met her with something new in their eyes. Not pity, not even admiration. Dismiss respect. Conservation with Skip Dodge. Not much disclaimer. One afternoon she found a sticky note left on her locker door. No name, just a short message. "Thanks for showing us what backbone looks like. Signed, a nurse who's learning to grow one." At home, Carter made a drawing of their family. Rachel, Caleb, himself, and underneath wrote, "We protect each other." Rachel put it on the fridge. One morning, weeks later, they visited the gas station again. This time, Caleb stayed in the truck with Carter, while Rachel went inside. The cashier was new, young, nervous. But when he saw her, he didn't flinch. He didn't look away. He smiled. "You're the nurse, right?" Rachel nodded. He reached behind the counter and slid her a chocolate bar. "On the house," he said. "My sister's in the ER too. She says you're a legend." Rachel laughed softly. "Tell her we're just tired people in sneakers, trying to keep the world stitched together." She walked out into the sunlight. Caleb was leaning against the truck, arms crossed. He handed her a cold bottle of tea. "Still want to move to Montana?" he asked. Rachel sipped. Thought about it. Ben smiled. "Not yet. I think I've got more work to do here." They stood there for a moment, the gas station behind them. The horizon stretched ahead. It had started with confrontation, with humiliation, with fear, but it ended with truth and presence and a community forced to reckon with itself. Rachel looked out across the road and thought, not about the past, or the headlines, or the threats. She thought about the quiet power of standing your ground, and how sometimes the strongest armor isn't loud. It's earned, it gets lived. It's felt. Together, the Norwoods got into the truck and drove off, not into the sunset, but into a life reclaimed. And for once, the road ahead didn't feel dangerous. It felt like theirs.